If you are looking for truth, you have come to the right place. We are shining the beam of light onto the Bible, in particular, God's Torah, the instructions. And in this series, we are on part 9 of learning the instructions of God that God has given to us at Mount Sinai. Now, the number that we're trying to reach is what is still applicable to the average person today. Therefore, the land commandments are not in this listing. The temple process and biblical slavery, which is more like servitude, willingly, is not in this listing. And this is the second to last part of our 10-part series. And at the end of this, we will arrive at the number that will show us how easy it is to keep the law. Many people out there will repeat the talking point that the law is too hard to keep and that no one can keep it. And that's what this series is dedicated to, is getting down to the details of examining the law and seeing, is it really that difficult to keep your neighbor's dog when the dog runs away? And is homosexuality done away with? How about bestiality? Are any of these laws that we're pointing out about adultery been done away with? Should they still be standing? Now let's begin. We pick up at 248. We are in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 1, and this is on that lost property must be returned to its owner, in which it states, "You shall not see your brother's oxen or his sheep go astray, and hide yourself from them. You shall in any case bring them again unto your brother." So if an animal from your neighbor gets out and you see it, you're not to turn away. You're supposed to go help or catch it and store it for them, feed it, take care of it, and then return it when you see your brother or your neighbor again. What's so bad about following that rule? Number 249, Deuteronomy 22, verse 3, not ignoring lost property to be returned to its owner, in which it states, "In like manner you shall do with his donkey, and so shall you do with his raiment, and with all lost things of your brothers, which he has lost, and you hast found, shall you do likewise. You may not hide yourself." So you are to take care of your neighbor or your brother or your friend's lost property and give it back to them. You're not to say, "Oh, that's not my business." No, it is your business. And we don't want people stealing things, and we don't want people suffering and being sad because they lost things. Number 250, Deuteronomy 22, verse 4, on assisting a man loading his beast with its burden, in which it states, "You shall not see your brother's donkey or his oxen fall down by the way, and hide yourself from them. You shall surely help them to lift them up again." In other words, if you see someone struggling, you're not to turn away. We are to help each other. That is one of the essence of the Torah, is that we are to be loving to one another. And so if you see someone stressing, someone struggling, can't lift something up, be helpful. Number 251, Deuteronomy 22, verse 5. Women not to wear men's clothing or adornments, and men not to wear women's clothing or adornments. In which it states, "A woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor a man to put on a woman's garment, for all who do so are an abomination unto the Lord." This is what the Bible says. This is not my opinion. My opinion actually lines up exactly with this. But the Bible says that you're not to be cross-dressing. You're not to be switching people's clothes and pretending to be a woman or pretending to be a man. The Bible is very clear on that. And remember that the strongest word that God can use is the word abomination. And it's also important to note that the Bible says that if you go along with sin or you promote sin, you are just as guilty as the act. So to be all right with people cross-dressing and to promote it and say, that's fine with me, I think it's a good thing, well, you are just as guilty as the one who cross-dresses. Number 252, Deuteronomy 22, verse 6, not to take the entire bird's nest from the mother or her young, in which it states, if a bird's nest chance to be before you in the way of a tree or on the ground, whether they be young ones or eggs, and the mother is sitting upon the young or upon the eggs, you shall not take the young or the mother. So there is a bit of a conservationist element in here that God is thinking of the environment, the population of the birds. And so he doesn't want those birds to go extinct from everybody going and eating a bunch of eggs and eating the mothers and stuff like that. So we are to give them a chance to keep procreating, to have babies. It doesn't mean you can't eat eggs and you can't eat the birds. By no means you're supposed to, but you are to be kind to the whole process and allow them to procreate, and then you can go on to do those things. And if you take eggs, you don't take all of them, you maybe take a few of them. Number 253, Deuteronomy 22, verse 7, on setting free the parent bird when taking the nest, which it states, you shall surely let the mother go and take the young for yourself, that it may be well with you and that you may prolong your days. So if you're going to take the nest, you got to let the mother go because she can have more babies. In the case of you are starving and you need food, you are to let the mother go and you can eat the young. And notice it does not say eggs here because you're supposed to let the eggs hatch, or you're supposed to leave some eggs. If there's an abundance of eggs, you only take a few according to that last verse. And here, if it's young and you're starving, because it says that you may prolong your days, that infers that you are hungry and you need to live. So there is a proper etiquette to that process. Number 254, Deuteronomy 22, verse 8, building fences on roof and removing potential hazards from the home, in which it states, when you build a new house, then you shall make a parapet for the roof, basically a wall or safety mechanism to your roof, that you may not bring guilt of bloodshed on your household if anyone falls from it. So you are to think in the terms of safety, and you are to put in safety measures because you need to be keeping an eye out that you don't have accidents. So God is very smart. He knows we're careless. He knows we don't think ahead. He knows that we're not generally a safe group, but for loving, we are going to think about other people's safety. And so when you build your house, make it safe. 255, Deuteronomy 22, verse 9, not to sow grain or vegetables in a vineyard, in which it states, you shall not sow your vineyard with different kinds of seed, lest the yield of the seed which you have sown and the fruit of your vine be defiled. So you want to be organized when you grow these things, and if you put them too close together or you mix them, They're going to be fighting over each other. They're going to be fighting for soil, and you're going to get malnourished plants. Number 256, Deuteronomy 22, verse 10. Work not with two different kinds of animals together. Now, this is a strange thing to state, considering most people don't farm anymore, and most people use machines. But this is talking about the animals when we were plowing and moving things on a farm. Basically, you want equal strength. You don't want to be causing one to suffer and one to do all the work, because that's just mean. You have to project a little bit of humanity into the situation. And so this verse states, you shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. They're unequal strength. One is faster and one is slower. One is stronger and one is not as strong. And so it's just common sense here. Don't be inhumane and do weird stuff like this. God's pretty smart. He's figured out a lot of things out, and we just need to get back to the heart of the matter. Let's do common sense. Number 257, Deuteronomy 22, verse 11. And this one is talking about not to wear any certain type of clothing. Mystery. All right. And this is what it says. You shall not wear a garment of different sorts, such as wool and linen mixed together. Now, we kind of talked on this before. Now, most of the time, people are not mixing wool and linen together. So if you find a garment out there with those two mixed, you really found something, because it's pretty rare. But there is another verse that accompanies these types of verses, and they're always talking about a specific type of clothing in the Hebrew that the Canaanites were wearing. So I don't know what that clothing is, but I'm pretty sure nobody is wearing that Canaanite cloth, that specific garment. And so we don't have to worry too much about this. However, I make sure I don't have any wool linen mixed clothings, just to be considerate of this verse. Number 258, Deuteronomy 22, verse 12, wearing a reminder. Now, you may have seen this referenced before. It's called a tzitzit, or a tassel. It is the string that is woven to represent God's name. And Jesus wore this when he was walking around. And you can remember the verse that the woman who had issue of blood, she reaches up and she grabs the hem of his garment in the English, but she grabs the tzitzit of his garment. And so this is a fulfillment of a previous verse in the Old Testament, that the Messiah would have healing in his wings. And that particular word is connected to tzitzit. He would have healing in his tzitzit, in his tassel. And so this verse states, you shall make tassels on the four corners of your clothing with which you cover yourself. And so I personally use historical context of what were they doing. And the historical context is that it's talking about the prayer shawl, the blanket, the covering, the thing that keeps you warm, the place you go for your private prayer in your prayer closet. This is the prayer shawl. And so the ancient times, when people were working and doing their business, they wore their undergarments, their underclothes, their tunics. They would wrap them up and all that stuff. And so when they were not working, not busy, they would keep warm by wearing their prayer shawl, or talid in the Hebrew. And so that is what I have. I have a prayer shawl that has tzitzits on the corners. Number 259, Deuteronomy 22, verse 18. The defamer of his bride is flogged and may never divorce. And this, we need a little bit of context. If a man falsely charges a woman of not being a virgin, and the woman's parents prove she is a virgin, this is shortly after being married, and this verse states, then the elders of that city shall take that man and punish him. If he claims that his wife is not a virgin on the night they're married, then you have to go to the elders and prove it. And there's a whole system of that. And you can look at our laws here in the United States. We still have on the books that if you're married under false pretenses, if the woman's not a virgin, she claimed to be a virgin, and you married her because she was a virgin, then there is fraud abound and the contract is no good. But if the man is proven wrong, he is to be punished. Number 260, Deuteronomy 22, verse 19, and this is continuing on. We're getting more detail from that situation. Divorce not the wife after falsely slandering her. And it says, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver. This is his punishment. And give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought a bad name upon the Virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife. He cannot divorce her all his days. So there you have it. You have the complete thought of this situation, that the man is to be fined. He gives the money to the father of the wife, and he can never divorce her if she is proven to be a virgin. Number 261, Deuteronomy 22. And we need 20. We need verse 20 to encapsulate verse 21. And this is dealing with if the woman lied and married under that lie. Verse 20. Then they shall bring out the young woman to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones. Now, we can't do something like that. That is not legal in most countries. So we couldn't do something like that. But continue on, because she has done a disgraceful thing in Israel to play the harlot in her father's house, so you shall put away the evil from among you. But what we're stating here is that we need to put out the evil from among you. You cannot get married under false pretense. You have to be truthful in your contract with God. Number 262, Deuteronomy 22, verse 22, adultery. God considers adultery a very serious thing. It is cheating on your neighbor, just like idolatry is cheating on God. And so this verse states, if a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die. The man that lay with the woman, and the woman, so you shall put away the evil from Israel. Now there's a couple things in here. What this is stating is that if a woman and a man are committing adultery outside of marriage, and they're found with two witnesses, that's the important part. Then they have to go to the courtroom and all that stuff. And we cannot do that. We don't have a temple. But the point of this is that you're not to be sleeping with other people outside of marriage. You are to honor that covenant that you've made. Number 263, Deuteronomy 22, verse 24, on stoning transgressors of certain commandments, which it states, then you shall bring them out unto the gates of the city, and you shall stone them with stones, that they may die. The woman, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he has humbled your neighbor's wife, shall put evil away from among you. So again, we cannot stone people. However, there is the underlining bit, because they would have gone through the court system. They would have had two witnesses. So there is a government deciding this that has not been set up. However, we can glean from this that God considers it a very important rule that we are not to sin by sleeping with other people's husbands and wives. We are to put this evil out from among us. And that is the part that is still representative today. Number 264, Deuteronomy 22, verse 25. If a woman is raped, in which this verse states, but if a man finds a betrothed young woman, that means she is promised to be married. She's wearing an engagement ring, sort of sense. And she is in the countryside, and a man forces her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. So, what this verse is stating is if a woman is betrothed, she is promised to be married, and she has been forced, that means a man raped her, and it is found out about. Two witnesses find her or him or whatever the situation is, then the man shall be put to death. The woman shall not be put to death. Number 265, Deuteronomy 22, verse 26, not punishing a person for a sin committed due to rape. So, continuing on from this last verse, this one states, but you shall do nothing to the young woman. That is, in the young woman, there is no sin deserving of death. For just as when a man rises against his neighbor and kills him, even so this matter. Notice it doesn't say murder. It's like saying an accident. So it's unfortunate that the woman got raped. She is not to be punished. The man is to be punished. Number 266, Deuteronomy 22, verse 29. Unbetrothed woman and a man have sex. Now, this is a different circumstance. There is no force in this particular instance. And we're going to learn what that means. Then the man who lay with her shall give to the young woman father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has humbled her. He shall not be permitted to divorce her all his days. If you marry under other circumstances, then you can divorce. So, this would apply to a lot of people today. This verse is stating that if a man has sex with a woman who is not betrothed, and it's not rape, it's consensual, that he is then to go into the process of having her as his wife. And because he did things out of order, he did not betroth her, he did not marry her, then divorce is off the table. He now has to stay with her forever. Number 267, Deuteronomy 22, verse 30. Do not sleep with a father's wife, in which it states, a man shall not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's bed. That one's pretty straightforward. And this part about nor uncover his father's bed, you could read that to mean not even sleeping in your father's bed. And of course, this is dealing with someone who has grown up. Number 268, Deuteronomy 23, verse 13. So include a digging tool among the implements of war, which it states, and you shall have a paddle among your weapons, and it shall be that when you ease yourself or go to the bathroom, you shall dig with the paddle and shall turn back and cover that which comes out of you. So, this is regarded to war, but this commandment could be applied to just everyday life. This is common sense. God has put it in measure that you are not to have sewage just laying around, infecting the environment, getting into the waterways and poisoning people. We are to bury our waste, to be clean and organized. And you can see that God is a clean, organized, understanding God. And all these people out here that are doing evil things, you can see them just all into the nasty. It's also important to note that if you do any study into the occult or paganism in ancient times, you will find that a lot of the rituals include excrement and human waste. And so uncleanliness and doing nasty things with your feces is very much wrapped up in being evil and being on the other side of God. Number 269, Deuteronomy 23, verse 17. No relations with the harlot, which this verse states, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. So, making it clear, this is the spiritual Israel, this is the tribes, and you are grafted into one of the 12 tribes. Not everybody is from the tribe of Judah that is Jewish. We are the 12 tribes. The lost house of Israel is part of the 12 tribes. And so, if you want to be grafted into God's covenant, if you want to be a part of those tribes, you can join the tribes, just like Ruth joined the tribes. If you want to be joined in, then you are to not have any daughters that are harlots. So you are to raise your daughters so that they are pure and clean and not out there prostituting themselves or doing anything like that. Number 270, Deuteronomy 23, verse 29, charging interest to your brethren, in which this verse states, you shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money or food or anything that is lent out at interest. So this particular verse, you have the connotation that is the people of God that are following the commandments, and they are your brethren. So anyone who's united under God of the Bible, then you are to not give them interest. And so what the Jewish people today say, well, if they're Gentile and they may believe the same God, but they're not Jewish, then we can charge them interest. But that is not what the Bible is saying here. We're not to charge people interest. Number 271, Deuteronomy 23, verse 20, on lending money to the foreigner with interest, which it states, to a foreigner you may charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all to which you set your hands in the land which you are entering to possess. So the part of this verse that applies, so if someone is outside of worshiping God, say a Hindu or a Muslim, you can charge them interest. However, should you be loving at all times? Yes, you should be loving, and so you shouldn't charge them a ridiculous amount to charge. When I give away money to friends in need, I don't charge them interest. In fact, I don't ask for money back. because I want to be a blessing to everyone around me. Number 272, Deuteronomy 23, verse 21, on that a man must honor his oral vows and oaths, which it states, when you shall vow a vow to Jehovah, that's Jehovah in English, your God, you shall not slack to pay it, for Jehovah, your God, will surely require it of you, and it would be sin in you. So, a man's word is his bond. It's the most important thing he's got, and this is a leftover tradition of what the Bible has stated, and what people of God used to do is they would make a vow and they would stick to it no matter what, because it would be a sin unto them if they break their vow which they have spoken. And of course, when they speak their vow, they have to include God's name. And we've lost that over the years. People are not using it. They're not using God's name. Number 273, Deuteronomy 23, verse 22, abstaining from vows. But if you abstain from vowing, it shall not be a sin to you. So if you just don't do vows at all, it's not a sin to you. Even though God says, I want you to do vows and make oaths and swear by his name, it's not a sin if you don't. It's kind of like playing it safe. So that's also an option. Number 274, Deuteronomy 23, verse 24. An employee is allowed to eat the produce while he's working in the field. And so this verse states, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, because you're working, you may eat your fill of the grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in your container. It's also connected to gleaning. If you're gleaning from your neighbor's field or vineyard, whatever, you are to not bring a big container, a big basket, whatever. You're not to just, let me take advantage of the situation. You're supposed to take what your hands can eat and carry, and that's all you get. And you just get enough for the meal, and then the next day you can do it again. But you're not to exploit the situation. 275, Deuteronomy 23, verse 25. A worker is not to cut down standing grain during work, which it states, when you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. So again, this is like the gleaning, and this is something that the disciples were doing along with Christ, that they were plucking the heads from the grain, rubbing it in their hands, and eating the wheat. And so this is completely justified. They were gleaning. The Torah was allowing for that. Now, what was incorrect was that an oral Torah, which is what the Pharisees follow, it is considered work if someone was to do that. And so the disciples were violating oral Torah, which God said don't add to or take away. So a lot of these situations where Jesus is doing something in front of the rabbis and they get into a hissy fit, it's usually because he's breaking oral Torah, man-made commandments, right in front of them. So the disciples were doing nothing wrong. Number 276, Deuteronomy 24, verse 1, on the law of marriage, which it states, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some uncleanliness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of the house. This is the verse where you get divorce. This is something that Moses was told by God, this is what we're going to do. If a man and woman can't get along, and the man is the one that writes their certificate, it's called a get. He is the one that issues it to the woman. The woman cannot divorce the man. Only the man can divorce the woman. So that is the process. Take it up with God if you don't like it. But divorce is legitimate. And if you go to the verses where Jesus is discussing divorce, he is not saying you cannot divorce. What Jesus is saying is he is addressing an issue at that time where people were called chained woman. And that is where a man was refusing to give a woman a certificate of divorce. He was chaining her down, and he was sending her back to her parents, and she was still under her husband's head, but he was going off and committing adultery, and he was sleeping with other people. And so that is not to happen. You're not to chain the woman. You are to give her a divorce so she can be free. And that is the issue that Jesus was covering. Very popular issue at that time. And it's still an issue today in Israel specifically. And so divorce is allowed. It's very sad and unfortunate, but God does not make mistakes. Number 277, Deuteronomy 24, verse 4, remarrying not your divorced wife after she has remarried. So this is one of those technicalities that you really cannot do. Don't do this. Nobody even think about doing it. This is an abomination. God does not like this particular thing. And so you're not to be playing around with marriage. It's serious. And so this verse states, when her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. And you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance. So, for an example, to make this clear, if a woman marries husband A, and then they get divorced, and she marries husband B, and then they get divorced, the woman cannot go back to husband A and remarry. The only person that she could go back to and remarry is husband B. And if she goes on to marry husband C, then she cannot go back to husband A or husband B. She can only go back to husband C if they get divorced. And so you can't go back and forth. You have to continue on. It's very sad. Even if you love that person, this is not permitted in the Torah. So I hope this has been very insightful. I hope you have learned a lot about how to love God and how to love your neighbor and to take care of one another. I think these laws are all wrapped in common sense, and to say they are done away with is really skipping over the details and just making assumptions, because the flesh does not want to keep these rules. The flesh cries out for freedom to be wicked. So we need to reel back in our flesh and get control of ourselves. And the Bible is the way to get control of yourselves, with the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ as our example. So thank you so much for joining me. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below, hit the bell notification. Help this channel as much as you can. I really appreciate all your comments. I really appreciate everyone watching it. I'm going to continue to be pumping out these videos. I have a whole bunch more planned, and this is not the last video of the series. We have one more to go in which we will land on a number. Please join us for that one. Thank you, and God bless.